Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my weekly cult situation report. I am Daniela, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, former Captain Mestenek of the United States Army. I wrote a book called Uncultured about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and going into the cult of the U.S. Army. You can get signed copies attached here or listen to me read it to you anywhere you get your audiobooks. I have written a second book. This one teaches you about cults and what's going on in America right now. Intrinsically, this is the actual tactics handbook that explains to you how they do it and what's going on right now. Much anticipated, comes out January 20th. You can get pre-orders here as well. We have all kinds of fun bundles. And, very excitingly, I have the deconstruction workbook that goes along with the culting of America. This one helps you understand cults and protect yourself. This one helps you deconstruct the ideology or the worldview that the cult gave you. You can deconstruct any ideology. I'm currently using it to deconstruct Swiftianity, and it's pretty intense. Check out my videos on that. So, if you are new, every Friday in the military, in the Army at least, every officer sends up their situation report to their higher headquarters. As the intelligence officer, which is the expert on the bad guys, my situation report is all about the bad guys. So this is everything that happened in the world of cults and in my world of cults. Thanks for being here. Museum of Sex in New York. Can we talk? The first story in this week's SitRep has no news source because it comes to us from a knitting cult friend, Sarah. Sarah grew up with my talent manager, Lizy Freudmann, who has an essay in the book, and still lives in New York. Sarah is very cool. I met her recently in New York, and she showed off her cool magnetic glasses that she can coordinate with all of her outfits. Hi, Sarah. I'm jealous, but I have my VA glasses. Back to the story. Also in New York is one of the 2 Museum of Sex locations. Sarah sent Lizy a photo of a poster she saw advertising an exhibit that is now on display at the museum called Utopia, 3 Centuries of Sexuality in American Cults and Communes. Sarah noticed that the poster was somewhat problematic. It features a photograph of women/femme-presenting people gathered around a car. Seated atop the car is a skinny white woman holding up 2 posters. One of the posters is the face of cult leader James Edward Baker, also known as Father Yod, of the Source family, because cults always love familial language. Notably, there are also children featured in this photo, little girls wearing dresses, and we are going to start with when children are involved. It is not called sex, it is called rape. Should there be children in your museum of sex? No. The Source family was one of the Hollywood cults from the 60s/70s. Father Yod ended up with 13 wives, some of them very young. The exhibit's curator, Jody Willie, also co-directed a 2012 documentary about Father Yod, the Source family. So the KCL team has done some digging on the exhibit because we think it's kind of gross to use this image featuring obviously underage children in marketing materials for a museum about sex. We wanted to know who was involved in putting this exhibit together, what experts were consulted, and what perspective it offered on the actual danger of high-demand groups. One name on the credit page for the exhibit jumped out at us, the only name that we recognize. And honestly, if there's an exhibit on cults, there should not be only one name that I recognize, quite frankly. J. Gordon Melton is listed in the special thanks section. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because we hate that guy. Melton is a highly problematic figure in the history of cult scholarship. He was paid by the Children of God $100,000 to study them and ultimately said they weren't a cult. And he was a key figure in the cult wars, which was when religious leaders in the 80s decided that if laws against coercive control were to happen in America, it would take away their control. So religious leaders and religious scholars created an entire campaign to not say cult. And we hear this all the time on this channel. You shouldn't use the word cult because it harms people and it blah, blah, blah. The man who coined the term new religious movements took $100,000 to say the pedophile cult wasn't a cult. Oh, by the way, the pedophile cult used that in 4 countries to get the children given back to the pedophile cult. I think everything J. Gordon Melton has ever touched in his life should be thrown out with extreme prejudice. And I think religious scholars should stay the fuck out of cults because it is not the same field. Sorry that I just don't care that much about this topic. The museum website features a quote from the curator saying that the groups that are featured in the exhibit were laboratories for rethinking nearly every aspect of life: sexuality, spirituality, gender, family, and art. Through their archives and creative expression, we witness their attempt to reimagine new ways of living and loving in America. The exhibit description also talks about these groups challenging mainstream norms and having collective visions of freedom, along with other good-sounding claims that may or may not be true. The list of groups featured is diverse. We know some that were/are very culty and super dangerous, like the Rajneesh's followers of Osho, who were also bioterrorists. So, from what we can tell, without having seen the exhibit ourselves, the museum has chosen to present these groups in a more favorable light than we think is reasonable, which is always, and I mean always, the case when they choose to go with new religious movements instead of the word cult. Lizy has reached out to the museum to better understand the goals of the exhibit and whether it addresses some of the highly problematic, to say the least, behaviors of the groups featured. And my first question is did you talk to any of the children who were survivors of these groups who were questioning sexuality? Because we can tell you how to do it in a sensitive way. I was told over and over again by book companies that I could not tell my story because you cannot put pedophilia on the page. And you know what I did? I put pedophilia on the page. And you know what happened? Because I'm the actual victim of it, I didn't do it in a voyeuristic, exploitative way that hurts other victims. I did it in a way that helps other children who were victimized in this way. That's all you gotta do. All you gotta do is talk to the people who are the survivors of it. We will tell you how to do it gently. That's it. We fight super hard to keep the exploitative videos of us on the internet for the sake of history. If you talk to us, we know how to tell you how to do it. It's absolutely insane, by the way, to make this and not have stuff about the children of God and then to not talk to any of us about it. We're right here. The survivors of the pedophilia cult, some of us even do this for a living. Okay, I'm mad about this, and I haven't even seen the exhibit. As of yet, we've received no response, but we'll keep trying. There's also an interesting conversation to be had here about the way we document and discuss history. These things happened, it's important to talk about them, about why people joined groups like the Source family and the Children of God. It isn't inherently bad to display artifacts that are part of problematic stories. For example, we see photos from concentration camps and Nazi memorabilia featured in exhibits on World War II at the time. But there's a line between education and exploitation, and the KCL team is inclined to think that featuring the Source family photo and the underage children in it as part of the marketing materials for this exhibit crosses the line into exploitation territory. To talk to someone at the museum about our concerns and try to ensure that there's some space for counter narratives to the glossy, positive vibes presented on the website. Also, if anyone has been to the exhibit, let us know what you think. Was there any representation of folks who were harmed by these groups? We hope so. We hope there's room in this conversation for both. Understanding the appeal and the danger of collective communal groups that set themselves apart from more mainstream culture. Thanks again to Sarah for flagging this for us. And again, it's this was the problem with the cult wars. What the result of the cult wars was academics deciding that you don't listen to cult survivors. You don't listen to cult survivors because they are disgruntled. So for 20 years, everything we knew about cults only came from academics who were being very forgiving and understanding of the cults. Just calling it utopia just tells me you don't know what you're doing and you didn't do the right research. Okay. Greggy's cult, the digital doom coven hiding inside your kids' video games. Federal prosecutors have uncovered a horrifying digital cult calling itself Greggy's Cult, a secretive online network that embedded itself inside kids' gaming platforms, turning Roblox, Discord, and Counter-Strike into recruitment grounds for exploitation and control. According to the indictment, 5 men scattered across the U.S. spent years operating like a full-blown cyber cult, isolating children as young as 11 years old, coercing them through fear, humiliation, tech sabotage, and physical domination. Investigators say the group didn't just blackmail victims into creating explicit content. They layered their abuse with ritual-like ownership practices, forcing children to write cult members' names on their bodies and film themselves begging for forgiveness, mimicking obedience rituals common to high-control groups. Do not ever let your children go from a video game to another app where they meet people or talk to them. Also, prosecutors say that once the cult had a child trapped, members escalated their control into lethal territory, telling some victims to kill themselves. Instructions that echo the darkest endgames of destructive cults. This one has been going on for a while as well, because we have talked about it before. Authorities describe the group as highly manipulative and shockingly organized. The cult used malware to lock kids out of their computers until they complied, effectively trapping minors inside a digital punishment chamber they couldn't escape. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's often wrong about things, was right when she noted that this case is a stark warning of how easily predators can hide within platforms children use every day. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch emphasized that this kind of operation shows how predators exploit the illusion of safety in online communities, embedding themselves like sleeper cells in digital spaces designed for play. And let's note here that the game itself doesn't have to have anything wrong with it. This is just a tool that predators are using. The indicted members include Hector Bermudez of Queens, arrested Tuesday, as well as suspects in New Mexico, Hawaii, Colorado, and California. All face federal charges, including sexual exploitation of a minor, conspiracy to communicate threats, and distribution of illegal material. This case is a brutal reminder that cults don't always look like compounds, robes, or charismatic leaders. In the age of gaming platforms and anonymous messaging apps, the most dangerous cults may hide behind avatars, usernames, and the everyday digital spaces that kids trust most. And in Culting of America, the new book coming out, we have talked about internet cults. Specifically, I made a video on those today. You can go check that out. As a content creator, I make my living on the internet, and I know it's been such a powerful tool to help so many people find resources, learn things about the world and themselves, and made all kinds of amazing things possible. But also, tools can be weapons. Sometimes the KCL team thinks that maybe the internet was a mistake. Canada declares 764, Manic Murder Cult, and Terrorgram Collective as terrorist entities. On December 10th, 2025, Canada officially added 3 extremist networks, 764, Maniac Murder Cult, and Terrorgram Collective, along with the armed insurgent group Islamic State Mozambique, to its list of designated terrorist entities. Sorry, I know in English it's called Mozambique. I always say it in Brazilian Portuguese in my head. Remember the Maniac Murder Cult from a few weeks ago? We covered them a few weeks ago when their leader, Commander Butcher, pleaded guilty to soliciting hate crimes in Brooklyn. Public Safety Canada described these groups as ideologically motivated violent extremist networks, or IMVEs, that operate across borders and pose a significant threat to public safety. According to the department, these networks exploit social media and online gaming platforms to recruit and radicalize individuals, disseminate propaganda, and incite violence, both online and in the real world. The designation carries immediate legal and financial consequences. Properties owned by these groups within Canada must be frozen and reported to law enforcement agencies, including the RCMP and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Additionally, it is now a criminal offense for anyone in Canada or Canadian citizens abroad to knowingly deal with the assets of these designated organizations. Islamic State Mozambique, also included in the designation, is a regional branch of ISIS that seeks to seize territory, infiltrate civilian populations and security forces, and commit acts of terrorism. By targeting both homegrown and transnational extremist networks, the Canadian government aims to disrupt recruitment, limit financing, and prevent the spread of violent extremist ideologies. These additions bring the number of terrorist entities listed under the Canadian Criminal Code to 90. And now for the cult of MAGA. The image above all, Trump's White House fights the visual contamination of accessibility. In a lawsuit that feels ripped straight from a handbook on the authoritarian optics management, the Trump White House is arguing that providing American Sign Language interpretation at press briefings would intrude on the president's prerogative to control the image he presents to the public, because cults are always about purity. Yes, according to the Justice Department lawyers, an interpreter standing on screen is now considered a threat to the purity of the leader's visual message. The fight comes from a discrimination case filed by the National Association of the Deaf, which sued after Trump and Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt stopped providing ASL interpreters at press briefings, despite federal disability laws requiring accessible communication. A federal judge, Amir Ali, rejected the White House excuses and ordered them to provide real-time ASL interpretation, noting that their complaints sounded less like legal arguments and more like resentment toward accessibility itself. Not super surprising from this regime. The Trump administration has regularly othered people with all kinds of disabilities and made it harder to be disabled in the United States in just about every way. He has also said that he wants to go after organizations that help veterans file their disability claims. His response was blunt. The White House's gripe is with Congress and with anti-discrimination laws themselves, not with the people who have a right to understand what the president is saying. But instead of complying, the administration is appealing the ruling, insisting that ASL interpreters complicate the president's spontaneity and, more importantly, interfere with his carefully curated public image. Disability advocates say the argument is not only flimsy, it's discriminatory on its face. The law doesn't care whether Trump dislikes being visually associated with disabled people. Access is a requirement, not an aesthetic option. This is so bananas, but here we are, with a president who cares more about his personal image than about keeping the American people safe and informed. The contrast is especially stark because the Biden administration provided interpreters even for last-minute press events, proving that accessibility isn't difficult, just politically convenient for an administration obsessed with optics and message control, and who, let's face it, hates disabled people. Here we have another classic example of a cult that is more interested in optics and control than operational efficiency. Or do we think it's just that Trump is so fragile and so resentful of Biden that he's willing to be this petty and spiteful to get back at Biden for beating him in 2020? Now the battle heads to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, where judges will decide whether the White House can prioritize the leader's image over civil rights. In classic cult of personality fashion, the administration appears willing to fight harder for brand management than for Americans' access to their own government's communication. Another example of Trump testing the checks and balances here, pushing back on the courts who are trying to prevent accessibility measures from being gutted even further than they already have been. In related news, the Times' new Roman revival, Rubio's bureaucratic font cult takes over the State Department. In the latest episode of Everything Must Look the Way Dear Leader Prefers, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has officially ordered the entire State Department to abandon Calibri and return to Times New Roman, size 14, effective immediately. Is it weird for tyrannical leaders to care about a font? Actually, because Medusa loves me, I just got this book in my little library yesterday, The Politics of Design. And what do we have here? The story of broken script. Hitler did not like black letter. When the Nazis came to power in 1993, they claimed the black letter as part of German heritage and made it the official typeface. The new typography and Bauhaus designers were branded as degenerate, and many designers were arrested or fled the country. Apparently, Hitler did not particularly like black letter. Hitler liked Futura, as Judith Schlansky Shalwansky wrote, his 1932 election poster used a sans serif similar to the Frittura. Blah, blah, blah. 8 years later, the Nazi government abandoned the black letter. The move is framed as restoring decorum. Professionalism, which we talk about in Culting of America, is just code for racism. And one voice for America's foreign relations. But insiders say it's yet another swipe in the Trump administration's crusade to dismantle DEI and accessibility policies across government. The irony, Calibri was adopted in 2023 specifically to make the State Department communications more readable for people with visual disabilities, based on recommendations from the department's own DEI and accessibility office. But Rubio dismissed that, calling the switch degradation and blasting it as a wasteful DEIA program. The directive now forces all diplomats, domestic and abroad, to standardize in Times New Roman for every memo, briefing document, and external communication, with the department arguing that serif fonts project authority, dignity, and formality. Actually, what serif fonts do is move your eyes across the page when you're reading on paper. Okay, that's why your professors want it. Non-serif fonts are easier to read on PowerPoint slides or signs. Critics include leaders from Visions, a nonprofit for the visually impaired, warn the shift actively undermines accessibility and ignores real-world impacts on people who depend on readable digital text. With DEI rollbacks sweeping through federal agencies and courts already pushing back on Trump's anti-DEI executive orders. I keep losing my spot. Rubio's font edicts lands like the smallest, pettiest culture war decree imaginable. But in cult logic, even the typography must obey. Oh goodness. The fascist aesthetic control is just so obvious here. Everything has to be the same and up to some imaginary standard of decorum. It is so puritanical in its demand for conformity. Also, it is so silly that with everything going on in the world, all the global conflicts, the war crimes, the shifting dynamics between the United States and our allies, the Secretary of State is issuing memos about fonts. Yes, that is what we need to be primarily concerned with. What is happening here? Also incredible is how hard the administration is working to make life as hard as possible for the more than 1 in 4 Americans who have some kind of disability. It is absolutely crazy and so tragic that these are the people Americans have chosen to be their public servants. Emphasis on public servants. We have got to do better. This is appalling. And in other cult news, Trump is trying to make the free days at National Park. He's trying to change them. He is trying to cancel Martin Luther King's Day and Juneteenth and put his birthday in as one of the days. All Geminis. Let's hang our head in shame. And if you're celebrating your leader's birthday, you might be in a cult. Yes, America, looking at all of us already. Question of the week. This week's question comes from YouTuber B.6603. Hey, Daniela, I don't think YouTube could be a cult, but it sure is a problematic attention and time sink for me. If you find it relevant, would you please make a video about cult aspects / tools that this program and other social media use to increase retention? I don't know if this makes a whole lot of sense, but if you think there's a connection, I would love to hear your thoughts about that. Lots of love from Brazil. Lots of love to you in Brazil and to Brazil itself, which, as many of you know, is near and dear to my heart because I grew up there. Let's talk a little bit about online cults and the algorithm. So, as I mentioned earlier, online cults are a thing, right? The internet is a tool. Predators can use said tool to coerce and manipulate you and exploit your labor. And that is what a cult is. Okay, now social media is built kind of to be culty. I mean, they are called followers, which is soups creepy. It creeped me out before I had to get on the internet. And this is part of why one of the things I created and is published in the book is my Guru Gotcha checklist. 20 things, 15 things, I think, aka cult leader bingo, that I think we should be concerned about in people on the internet, and I will read those in just a minute. But, you know, I come back to this. A cult is a group. So a social media app is not a group that is exploiting you, right? A cult is a group. Now, you can be on a group in social media, and then that would be culty. However, first, before I read you the Guru Got You list, I'm going to read to you about algorithmic radicalization. Let's see if I remember. I think that's in chapter 5 on isolation. Isolation, psychological isolation, social isolation, financial isolation, the isolating power of secrets and shame, information isolation. Social media's echo chambers are like escape rooms for the digital age. And the algorithms running our feeds are the ones locking the doors. An article titled Thinking Outside the Bubble, Addressing Polarization and Disinformation on Social Media, says that platforms like these amplify polarization, not just ideological differences like debating policy, but something even worse, affective polarization. That's when we stop merely disagreeing with people and start actively disliking them because they're on the other side. And the scary part, it's all designed to feed us more of what we already believe, reinforce our biases, and keep us stuck in loops of one-sided perspectives. The platforms claim to connect us, but really they're driving us further apart. Sociologist Jack Goldstone, the article notes, even compares today's political climate to the years leading up to the Civil War. It's that serious. This algorithmic radicalization is so well recognized now that it has its own Wikipedia page. In their attempt to keep us hooked on their platforms, sites like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are driving users toward progressively more extreme content, essentially preying on the addictive mechanisms of our brain that crave increasing stimulation to get the same rush. Facebook's own research stated as much, according to a slide from an internal presentation. Our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. If left unchecked, Facebook would feed users more and more divisive content in an effort to gain user attention and increase time on the platform. Did Facebook do anything to remedy this? As of writing, no. The reasoning being that it would negatively affect user engagement and therefore be anti-growth. With the help of recommender algorithms that record our interactions, from likes/dislikes and shares to time spent on posts, a mild interest can spiral into extreme beliefs, which are then normalized in a culture full of people who are also at home in front of their screens getting radicalized. Convincing, for example, over 77 million people in 2024 that Donald Trump deserved to be president again. So there you have it. And now, let me go through my Guru Gotcha checklist. I always say, I made this to keep myself in check. Number 1, claims to be uniquely special. Part of the reason I bring so many outside resources onto my channel is because of that. Hot/cold, come here, go away games. Tests your loyalty constantly. Lacks intellectual humility. Pretends to be an expert in everything. Trance talk. Thanks, Dr. Yanya Lalich. Charges for their presence, energy, or essence. I'm supposed to say essence there, not access. Hands out life advice they aren't qualified to give. Demands purity from followers. Controls followers' appearance and attitude. Badmouths other leaders. Blames systemic failures on individuals. Blurs sexual boundaries, often with help from the skinny white woman. Asks you to quit your job and follow them. And threatens you if you leave, or even if you think about it. All right. Events that we have coming up next week is Advanced Cult Book Club, or Cult Theory Book Club, if you will. And we are reading the middle chapters of A People's History of American Empire, which is the graphic novel connected to Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. Having some very interesting and intense discussions about that. Book club is the second Wednesday of every month, we discuss a memoir, and the third Wednesday of every month, we discuss a theory book that is virtual. It is a $10 Patreon membership, and you can find that in the show notes. We have the Stitch and Bitch coming up December 27th. Whoever wants to join me the Saturday after Christmas, maybe get a little space from your family. This is also a Patreon membership, and looking forward to seeing you all there. I have a Women Veteran Service Call January 3rd at 10 a.m. EST. Also on a Saturday. It's the first Saturday of every month. If you are a woman, non-male, trans, like if you are a femme of any kind veteran and you want to be a part of our call, just email admin@uncultureyourself.com. The leadership committee for the Angry Knit-In and I have decided to revise our plans a little bit, and that's because we found out that the cost for putting 10,000 people on the mall is $500,000. So we asked ourselves, what is the actual point? And the actual point is education. Educating ourselves on civic involvement and what to do and how to push back and how we figure all of that out. Because this is what Americans, millennials specifically, are really lacking, is education on civic engagement. So we have a website right now. It is linked here, Angry Knit-In, and you'll be able to find a lot of information. So we are going to do more of an inside event. This is going to be focused on education. We are going to be really focused, the whole planning team, in finding partners, building out the close-knit community part of the site that we are building, and me bringing that into the content that I do, teaching, helping to teach and helping to pass the mic to different organizations that are actually out here fighting back. We are going to try to raise $100,000, with which we are going to put on a kick-ass event and then hopefully still donate about $80,000 to 3 organizations that are doing the work. More to follow on all of that. We're going to start fundraising in earnest on Monday, so stay tuned. And if you are interested in coming, you can RSVP. Please, please, please. That's very helpful. If you know of an organization that would like to partner with us, we have a sheet for partner organizations to fill out as well. I have not one, but 2 podcasts. This week on Cults and the Culting of America, our wonderful Dr. Scott Lloyd talked with Ara Jade, who shared her 7-year experience in a high control group adjacent to the Hebrew Israelite movement. Ara, I'm not sure, explained how the group used biblical literalism, radicalized doctrine, and strict gender roles to create a sense of belonging while quietly stripping people of autonomy. Her story highlights how these groups manipulate identity, isolate members, and frame obedience as holiness. Ara ended with grounded advice for anyone questioning their group. Trust your instincts, seek outside sources, and be kind to yourself as you unravel what you've been taught. And hey, we've got the deconstruction workbook that is helpful for that. I think it might be the first thing like it out there. Over on Hey White Women, Rebecca and I talked about how cult dynamics show up in everyday systems, not just in groups we officially called cults. I shared how my patterns from my childhood in the Children of God reappeared in the military, and why coercive control, shame, and purity culture work the same across so many environments. We also looked at the difference between people consuming content versus actually digesting it, especially around anti-racism and accountability. Rebecca broke down the predictable patterns she sees online with white audiences, and we compared how different communities respond to correction and curiosity. The big theme, buy-in, how people get pulled in, why it feels so powerful, and how to step back from the perfectionism and urgency these systems create. You're allowed to say, yep, that got me for a minute, learn from it, and move forward. Next month for Memoir Book Club, we are reading Persepolis, which is also a graphic novel. Can we call it that when it's not a novel? This is the story of a girl living through the upheaval of the Iranian Revolution. It is one of talent managers Lizy's favorite books of all time. She's bought like 10 different copies of it over the years because she keeps giving it away. We do have a GoFundMe for the publishing of Culting of America, which I am investing a college loan amount of money into making the best book that we possibly can. It is linked in the show notes for anyone who would like to make a donation, and thank you so much to all of you who have helped out with this. This week, my team and I discussed the virtual launch party, and we think it's going to be extra special since we're getting most, if not all, of the team who helped bring the book together, so you can ask your questions. We think that the virtual Q&A is going to happen Tuesday the 20th before the in-person event, so please keep an eye out for that information if you donated. A donation at any level will get you access to the virtual launch party, and we cannot thank those of you who have already donated enough. You are amazing. Credits. This week's SitRep is written and produced by the Knitting Cult team. Research and writing by Meghan Picmann, my amazing admin, featuring contributions from my podcast producer, Haley Phillips, and the supervising production, research, and writing is done by Lizy Freudmann. This is her baby. Song of the week. At book club, we discussed Danny Wrench's memoir, Dark Squares, How Chess Saved My Life. It was such a good discussion. So many people shared their personal stories of surviving really hard, dark situations. It's amazing how people who've come from very different backgrounds and have very different experiences also have so much in common when it comes to unraveling the challenges of healing and moving forward. In the spirit of that conversation, I would like to recommend the song of the week, Healing Hurts by Blue Eyes. It's so good. Thanks to everyone who's brave enough to come and share their stories and support each other, or just listen and learn or discover new books. It's a wonderful thing to share. If you are interested, please think about joining us. And now for some nitpicking. First of all, I gotta show you these amazing earrings that I made out of a glasses case. They were like pleather tassels. I don't know. I love them so much. And I have made 3 cult coats for Christmas presents. I'm making a total of 8, but I only decided that 8 weeks before Christmas. And what's happening is I'm gonna finish them all in time for Christmas, but just not in time to be mailed out for Christmas. But here are 3. So we got a blue one. They're all getting really fun, crazy yarn in them because as one does. Got blue one. We got, this might be my favorite one. I hope the person who it's going to loves it enough. It's because it reminds me of like an amethyst geode. And those are from the part of Brazil where I grew up. This is the crazy coat. I called it a chaos coat because I just made it with all kinds of purple. And this one was to be black with purple accents. And so it is also very fun. It is very sparkly, although I'm not sure if that comes through. And I've got 3 more to go. I'm pretty sure we can do it. Thanks everybody for being here today. We are at 20 push-ups in our push-up challenge. So as ever, don't let the bad guys get you down. And if they do 20 push-ups and pop right back up. I cannot encourage you enough to go check out Heather Cox Richardson's page as well as Amanda Nelson's page. They are 2 women who are really keeping up with politics and history right now and are telling us there is much to hope. The bad guys are losing, regardless of whether it feels that way to you right now. Keep the pressure on. Keep being loud, obnoxious assholes with guns that don't do as they're told. Because that's who we are, America. And it's not going to work out for the tyrant who's trying to take over. Everybody, have a day. Stickers attached.